Next on KQED Newsroom, the Bay Area's biggest city elects a new mayor. Sam Liccardo shares his vision for San Jose.
We're going to make San Jose the most innovative city in the country, and in fact, the world.
Police surveillance technologies, how should they be used, and who sets the rules? Plus, the tales behind the tattoos of war veterans.
Instead of thanking a veteran, maybe in addition to thanking a veteran, ask them what their story is. Ask them the meaning behind, the tattoo that they have. And 9 times out of 10, they have a remarkable story to tell you.
Good evening and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. It took a week of ballot counting after the polls closed, but a winner has now been declared in the San Jose mayor's race. City Councilman Sam Liccardo beat out Santa Clara County Supervisor Dave Cortese by a slim margin. Liccardo will replace termed-out incumbent Chuck Reed, who endorsed him. A major issue from the campaign, voter-approved pension reforms. Liccardo supports them and has angered the police union as a result. One of his challenges will be to mend that relationship as he works to move San Jose forward. Sam Liccardo spoke earlier with Scott Shafer.
Sam Liccardo, welcome to Newsroom.
Thanks, Scott. It's a
Congratulations.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So you beat Dave Cortese by 51-49, a very tight race. The city's a little divided right now. How are you going to heal that rift? How are you going to bring people together?
Well, it is divided. That's not unusual. 3 out of the last 4 mayor's races in San Jose have been by similar margins. And so I've got a lot of bridge building to do. And I'm reaching out now, particularly to some of our public employee unions. I know they didn't support me. They spent a lot of money against me.
You sure about that?
I'm pretty certain of it. So I'm meeting with many of their leaders, and I'll be meeting with a lot of employees to see how we can start to heal the rift.
You were, of course, endorsed by the incumbent Chuck Reed, who for some was a polarizing figure. He really struck a harsh note, some would say, with the police union in particular. Do you feel that you need or want to offer an olive branch to the police in particular?
Well, yes, but for Chuck Reed, that's the price of leadership in a time of crisis. We face a severe crisis, and I think he led the way we needed to move at a time when we simply didn't have many choices, at least if we were going to keep the city solvent. On the other hand, we have new opportunities going forward.
How will you be different, do you think, from the current mayor?
I think in terms of fiscal issues, we have a strong alignment, but I think there are new opportunities ahead. And, I'm having conversations about how we can do things around public safety that don't simply involve discussions about pensions and badges and guns. I mean, there are opportunities for us to expand jobs programs for at-risk youth in the summertime, opportunities to expand after-school programs for kids. These are opportunities for us not simply to keep the city safer, but obviously to move the city forward in a significant way.
Public safety, of course, a big issue in this election. You've said you want to hire about 200 cops. Can you do that without resolving some of these other pension differences that have existed with the union?
Well, the differences will continue to persist. I know that because we simply can't continue to go the route we had gone in past years. We had dug a $3 billion unfunded debt in retirement obligations, pensions, and others. And so, we can't go back to the ways of the past. But it seems to me as we're restoring pay, as we're able to accommodate the officers in other ways, for example, with incentives that can keep retirement eligible officers on board, I think we'll be able to restore trust.
Some elected officials feel that the time that they have the most sort of power is at the very beginning, when you've got that honeymoon, and that's the time for sort of bold ideas. Are you going to be that kind of a mayor with bold ideas, or do you think of yourself as more of a nuts and bolts kind of guy? And if you're going for bold, what's that going to look like?
Well, I likely won't have a long honeymoon. I know, as you mentioned, we've got a divided city, and so I've got to get to work right away. On the other hand, you'll see plenty of bold ideas from me, and it won't just be at the beginning of my term.
Want to share one of them?
I actually wrote a book, a 140-page book, about how we're going to make San Jose the most innovative city in the country, and in fact, the world. After all, we're in the heart of Silicon Valley. We should be.
You know, those of us up here have seen the northern border of Silicon Valley gravitate up move up toward San Francisco. And a lot of these young startup employees want to live here. They commute down the peninsula. Do you feel like you're now competing with San Francisco in some way for those jobs?
Well, we're not just competing with San Francisco. We're competing with Bangalore. We're competing with Shanghai. This is a global stage we're on, and we need leadership at this time that's going to take San Jose to the next level. I think it fundamentally does start, though, with creating a vibrant urban center in Silicon Valley. And San Jose is really the only place with the capacity to do that.
Why do you say that?
Well, you know, San Francisco is nearing capacity. BART is nearing capacity. We're seeing Muni is moving at 5 miles an hour or less through much of the city. We know that San Francisco, we see it in the housing costs here. And so there needs to be an urban option in this region. Certainly Oakland is a good option as well, but San Jose is the largest city in the region, and it's time for us to start acting like it.
You mentioned BART. Of course, there's a hope and a plan to get BART down to San Jose, but it's expensive, as you know, and there's now talk about cutting out 2 or 3 of the stations that had been planned between Santa Clara and San Jose to make it more affordable, to maybe make it more likely to get that federal money. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I've been pushing hard on this BART extension for 14 years now, and so I expect we're going to get it built, and we're going to get all the stops built. I have no desire to see anything cut. I think we can do it with local financing. There are some creative options around tax increment financing, for example. We don't need the feds to do it all for us.
A lot of talk about trying to get the 2024 Olympics in the Bay Area. Are you all in on that?
As long as I'm not throwing the first pitch, I'll probably miss the catcher.
And then, of course, I've got to ask now, when you mentioned the first pitch, how hard are you going to go after the A's?
We're all in. We know that the owner and the ownership of the A's are very interested in being in San Jose. They've been interested for many years. Obviously, this will be decided by the Ninth Circuit, then we expect perhaps by the U.S. Supreme Court. As soon as we get the green light, we're moving forward.
So no plan to back off on the lawsuit?
As long as this is a privately financed stadium and there's no taxpayer money going into this, this is nothing but a win for our city. We've seen how transformative urban ballparks have been in cities from Baltimore to San Diego to San Francisco. This is a great opportunity for us. We're the 10th largest city in America. We're a major league team, and we're a major league city.
All right. Sam Liccardo, again, congratulations. Thanks for coming in.
Great. Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure.
And coming up, how veterans tell their stories through tattoos. But first, an ACLU report released this week examines the use of surveillance technology by local law enforcement. The report finds numerous cities and counties throughout California testing or using surveillance, in many cases without informing the public. In San Jose this week, community concerns flared over the police department's quiet purchase of a drone. It's led to calls for more public input and oversight. Joining me with analysis now are Nicole Ozer from ACLU Northern California and author of the recent report, Santa Clara County Supervisor Joe Simitian, and BART Deputy Police Chief Ben Fairow. Hello to you all. And Nicole, I want to start with you. What kinds of surveillance technologies are being purchased by cities and counties, and how much public input is there?
You know, we see cities and counties up and down the state of California spending vast sums of money on surveillance technology, everything from license plate readers to facial recognition to drones, as you mentioned in San Jose. More than $65 million, and with little to no public debate, very little consideration of the costs and benefits, and very few policies in place to make sure that misuse doesn't happen. And we're seeing this happen over and over, largely because a lot of local law enforcement is taking advantage of federal funds that are coming down, and they're often sidestepping the normal oversight procedures that city councils and board of supervisors have used for generations to make sure that there's really thoughtful consideration of community issues and that the public knows about these issues and can speak up and voice their concerns early in the process.
So we've heard a lot about those civil liberty concerns. Should we be using these surveillance technologies at all? That is, our privacy protections and public safety mutually exclusive in this case?
No, I don't think so, Twee. I think you can both protect the public and respect their privacy rights at the same time. Whether you're talking about cameras, drones, license plate readers, I have supported all of those at various times and places, but always with the caveat, that we ask and answer some important questions. Do we really need the data? If so, who's going to have access to it? What kind of safeguards are in place? Is it going to be kept in perpetuity? Because that raises some other questions. What's the difference between a mass sweep for data for law-abiding citizens as opposed to something that's targeted on folks who actually are likely to be bad guys? So I think you can use, it's not the tools that are the problem. I mean, I'm a Silicon Valley guy, so I would tell you it's not the technology that's the problem, it's the way in which we use them, and absent some of these questions and answers that the ACLU report very wisely raises, I think you have to expect that there's going to be misuse and abuse.
And you're actually proposing some policies around this
I am.
next Tuesday.
That's right. On Tuesday at our Board of Supervisors, what I've done is ask that our board refer the matter to the appropriate committee, direct our staff to look at a model ordinance. We're going to start with the model ordinance that the ACLU had. We'll tweak it. We'll look at other jurisdictions. It won't be exactly what's off the shelf because every jurisdiction is different. But we need to have both policies in place and an enforceable ordinance that says if and when we choose to use these, we're going to use these wisely, and we're going to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then we're going to have the safeguards in place. And I think we can do that.
And Deputy Chief Benson with Fairow, with BART. BART has wearable cameras that officers can clip onto their uniforms. You have this app now where people can take pictures and report a crime in progress. So you have various surveillance technologies. Why do you feel it's necessary to have it?
Well, there's no question that technology can help serve as a force multiplier for a law enforcement agency, especially in today's climate where there's a lot of budget cuts. We don't have the staffing that we'd like to have. Having technology at our disposal to work on solving crimes is an absolute must-have. One only has to look at Boston bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing, or in 2005, the bombing that occurred at the London Transit to see the value in it. But I agree, the truth's somewhere in the middle. There needs to be some safeguards, and in the end, it probably will end up somewhere in the middle.
And what kinds of policies do you have in place surrounding the use of this technology? What kinds of data are collected, how long it's kept for?
Well, for instance, with the body-worn cameras, we have a policy in place that talks about when we delete information and how it could be held. As was mentioned, if there's a crime attached to it, it gets held until that investigation's over. But if it's just a casual contact with a citizen, it gets deleted after a certain amount of time.
And there have been studies done that show that in communities that have these technologies, there was Rialto in San Bernardino County where once officers started using cameras, there was an 88% drop in complaints filed against officers, a 60% drop in use of force by police. So clearly these are tools that do work in a community, Nicole.
I think the important thing to really consider is to figure out what are the issues that each community is dealing with and what are going to be the best solutions to address that. Not every city and county is the same, but what we've seen consistently is the inconsistency that's happening up and down the state, that communities are deploying surveillance without asking the basic questions about why are we doing this, how are we going to do it, what is it going to do for our community, and how are we going to protect our community members from being misused? And when we look at sort of what's happening in different cities and counties, maybe there are policies in place for body cameras, but then there are no policies in place for facial recognition. So what this ordinance does is really make sure that there's a consistent conversation happening across technologies and that these basic questions get asked and answered before any programs go forward.
And these issues are coming up amid a backdrop of much broader concerns, NSA spying, right. And the Wall Street Journal had a report out this week talking about how the U.S. Marshal's Office is using devices that collect data from cell phones, not of just criminals, but law-abiding citizens.
Well, and again, it's not just the individual. I mean, you think, well, one piece of data, so what? But when you start to put all of those pieces of data together, so we know not only were you parked in front of the oncologist last Tuesday, but the following Tuesday and the following Tuesday and the following Tuesday, that starts to tell us something about your health situation. Or if it turns out you were parked at the racetrack day after day after day, or if it turns out you were parked someplace you shouldn't be, or that somebody thinks you shouldn't be, or if we've got that license plate reader at, let's say, Twee, you're going to the gun show at the fairgrounds, or that Ben's going to the anti-war protest in Berkeley. You know, click, 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 and then you assemble all that data, and it has the potential to be misused. So I think, you know, all of us would say, hey, the potential uses are great, and all of us want to catch the bad guys, and all of us want to deter crime. But we want to do that in a way that is respectful of people's personal privacy. And I think the risk is when you put all of that data together, all of a sudden, you paint a pretty big picture of somebody's personal life, and if you keep it in perpetuity, the risk of abuse goes up dramatically.
Well, so give me some specifics here. You would like to see legislation around this. What specific proposals would you like to see in place? How long should data be kept? What kind of data should be collected?
You know, I when I was in the state Senate, I had a bill that said that the data from these license plate readers ought to be purged after 6 months. I couldn't get that bill off the Senate floor.
Why?
Well, because we got pushback from law enforcement as well as the private sector, because these folks wanted to keep the data forever. And I kept saying, look, surely there's a sensible compromise between 6 months and forever. That forever's a long time. Can't we find a time? But you know, if you don't keep the data, then you can't misuse or abuse it. So for me, one of the starting points is collect only what you truly need. Know that you have a purpose. Don't collect it just because you can. And then purge it after some reasonable period of time. But, you know, the default has been, hey, if we can collect it all, and since storage is cheap, we'll keep it forever. I think those are two mindsets that need to be addressed pretty directly.
And we're dealing with incredibly invasive technologies here. We're talking about things like stingrays that, you know, can actually track cell phones of not just one individual that the police might be targeting, but actually hundreds or thousands of phones of innocent people that might be in the vicinity. Stingrays are a prime example of a technology that cities and counties throughout California have been quietly and secretly purchasing without the public knowing, often policymakers not knowing, and even keeping it secret from judges. So we're dealing with really invasive surveillance technology that's being purchased and deployed and has a real impact on the civil liberties and civil rights of Californians. And there just needs to be basic transparency and accountability for these uses.
Ben, do you feel like the technologies you're using are achieving the results you want? Are there aggressive efforts to analyze that and make sure that there aren't unintended consequences?
Well, again, no doubt that it is achieving its goals. It's helping us. BART has had video on its system since its inception. So BART has used video to solve many a crime in the system. The taser cameras that our personnel are currently wearing have helped immensely when it comes to not only crimes, showing what actually happened from the officer's viewpoint, but also helping with misconduct investigation, showing how the officer acted.
All right.
So no doubt about it, it's working.
We will have to let you have the last word on that. Unfortunately, we're out of time here. But thank you very much to all of you. Ben Fairow, BART Deputy Police Chief, Nicole Ozer with ACLU, and also Santa Clara County Supervisor Joe Simitian. Thank you all. Well, this week, as we honored our nation's military men and women for Veterans Day, a new exhibit highlights the experiences of veterans through their tattoos. The online exhibit features 24 vets and their war ink. Organized by the Contra Costa County Library, it's an unusual way to bring home the stories of returning military service members. Scott Shafer spoke to the curator and one of the vets. Earlier, first a clip from an exhibit video.
There have been a lot of chances for people to talk about Iraq or Afghanistan, but I don't think there have been a lot of chances for veterans themselves to talk about what those experiences were in their own voice in a way that doesn't have a politically charged message.
People always want to know and they ask you about your experiences and stuff like that. I started to think of tattoos as a way to tell the stories. So I got a soldier's cross tattooed on my back for my friends that died because I carried the burden of survivor's guilt.
Joining me now to talk about the War Inc. exhibit are U.S. Army veteran Zakariah Bass and Chris Brown, Contra Costa County Library Senior Manager. Guys, welcome.
Thank you, Scott.
Let me begin with you, Chris. You are the co-creator of this. What's a nice librarian like you doing, launching a project about tattoos?
Well, Scott, libraries connect us with stories, and stories help us make sense of our world and who we are as a nation. And we think that our veterans and the stories they have that they bring back home with them are important to tell and to connect to.
And Zakariah, what is it about tattoos that for you make them such a good vehicle for telling these stories?
Sometimes the stories that we have that we piece together and that our life experiences create aren't always easily articulated, and sometimes we need a medium or an outlet to put those into. And it could be other art forms too, but in this case, tattoos, and that's what it's been for me.
What kind of reaction are you hearing from veterans and the public about this?
I think from veterans themselves, we were surprised by how much it's meant to them. So a lot of the feedback has been, thank you for, getting inspired again. They really get into the fact that they're able to share their stories. But it's not just any story about their service. It's a story that they've decided to put on their own skin. It's something that's very personal to them.
We have a clip with a few of the veterans talking. Let's take a look, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
It's a tribute to those that are no longer here, but it also serves as a reminder to maintain my humanity and the experiences that I've been through, where I am now, and how that's going to shape who I become in the future.
Yeah, people are very quick to judge when they hear military tattoos, which is a shame, in my opinion.
It helps the civilian world kind of understand a little bit more about us, that we have thought processes behind our tattoos, behind what we do.
Zakariah, you've got some great tats on your forearms. Can you tell us a little bit about those and what they mean?
Sure. This tattoo, it's an angel, and wrapped in her wings is the American flag. And that, in the flag is names of men, that I worked with that are no longer here. And at the base of it are demons. And for me, that the whole tattoo represents the battle, the struggle that goes on in my head, in between, remembering the really awesome and beautiful things that came out of, the camaraderie that was built, and, the terrible memories of, for instance, like burying friends, or, just losing them, that sense of loss.
I could see how it would be kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, you'd never want to forget your buddies.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in a sense, you want to transition into civilian life.
Yeah.
Do you ever worry that the tattoos are in any way going to keep you in the military, in a sense?
No, I chose not to get any tattoos that I have to see every day until I was ready, until I was at a certain point, to be able to see those every day. I mean, there's just some things that are incredibly difficult to look at every day. Until you're ready, you really shouldn't do something like that.
Yeah. What are you hearing from vets in terms of what the tattoos mean to them?
Well, one point that the project's co-creator Jason Deitch has brought up with me over and over is that the military culture is not a very expressive culture, right? So you don't really have an outlet for talking about maybe the stress and the experience of war. And so a lot of these tattoos are just that natural expression or outlet where they're able to really give a voice to that experience that they maybe can't talk about with others. A lot of the veterans in the exhibit have talked about how their tattoo artist is kind of like their therapist, that they go and get these done, and afterwards maybe the survivor's guilt that they have is kind of lifted off.
And Zakariah, for you, how do you hope people react to your own tattoos, not just the ones in this exhibit? Do you want them to ask you about it? Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to you, or not?
Yes, I want them to ask, about my service, about what my tattoo means. I mean, instead of thanking a veteran, maybe in addition to thanking a veteran, ask them what their story is. Ask them the meaning behind, the tattoo that they have. And 9 times out of 10, they have a remarkable story to tell you, and they will be more than happy to.
In some ways, it's an invitation to ask. All right. Well, in the meantime, you can see more of the exhibit online at warinc.org. Chris Brown, Zakariah Bass, thank you both so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
And joining me now for a look at other news is Scott Shafer. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Twee.
Well, more than a week after the election, they're still counting votes in some places, some very tight congressional races still. What's the latest on those?
Basically good news for 2 Democrats who are in tight races. Ami Bera up in the Sacramento area finished election night about 3,000 votes behind. He's now about 700 ahead of the Republican Doug Osee. Even better news for Jim Costa. He had been way behind in Fresno. Nobody saw this one coming. Johnny Cheshire, a farmer who came out of nowhere and was ahead, and now Costa also ahead by about 700 votes. Not many, but certainly better shape than they were in on election night.
Could it be Thanksgiving before some of these races are resolved?
You know, I think in the coming years it's going to be not election day, it's going to be election month, because yeah, it could be Thanksgiving, and you know, we've seen, you know, God forbid, but we saw, remember Bush v. Gore, it was around Christmas.
The hanging chads.
The hanging chads. So yeah, there's more of these late ballots coming in, they got to count them. So it's going to take longer. And, you know, in coming elections starting next year, if you postmark your ballot by election day, that's going to count. That's not true now. It has to be in now. So if you just postmark it, those are going to count.
And then why are they making that change, though?
I think it's all about increasing voter access and giving more people an opportunity to vote. They're also going to allow, probably in 2016, same-day election voter registration. That's going to also delay the count. So it really is pushing it back and back in the calendar.
So it might not be election month, but an election 2 months after the fact.
Yeah, election season.
Yes, election season. There you go. On a different topic, federal judges today ordered California to expand its release of prisoners to get overcrowding down. What happened with that ruling?
Yeah, well, they're expanding the pool of inmates that they want to be considered for parole. Now they want the state to make all nonviolent second strike inmates, and there's thousands of them, who have served at least half of their term, to be eligible for parole, not necessarily to get out, but to be eligible. And again, it's just one of the several changes really going on in criminal justice in California, a lot of changes all at one time.
Well, because voters just approved Prop 47, which would change the penalties for non-serious crimes, reducing the penalties.
Yep, that and realignment, so there's a lot going on.
All right. Well, all right. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thank you.
And for all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.
I'm Scott Shafer. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Twee Vu. Have a good night.